Hi everyone, Lizelle here with Rhyme Signatures, the nerdiest music review this side of being an extremely aggressive frog-looking person with a vendetta against brain tadpoles. And today we're going to be doing a review of the new Neal Morse album, The Dreamer, Joseph, Part 1. Some things in life are reassuringly reliable, be that the rising and setting of the sun and how it warms our delightful planet, the fact that you are never going to win the lottery, do stop kidding yourself, that the first sip of coffee after a long commute always tastes the sweetest. Or perhaps it's something as simple as a Neal Morse album starting with a track with the word overture in it. Yes, my esteemed and wonderful audience, Mr. Neal Morse is back. But unlike his 2021 offering under the Neal Morse Band banner, with Innocence and Danger, this release sees a greater emphasis on his faith-based works, narratively at least. But thankfully this still manages to wrangle in plenty of excellent proggy goodness that we've come to know and love him for. This record has a lot more in common with his 2019 double album Jesus Christ the Exorcist than it does with the likes of Innocence and Danger or The Grand Experiment. But thematically it's similar in terms of its delivery to the likes of Similitude of a Dream and The Great Adventure. The Dreamer is a concept album, as is often the case for Morse, and in this instance we will be exploring the life of the titular Joseph, he of the coat of many colours. And unless you've been living under a rock for most of your life, I'm sure that a lot of you will have at least a passing knowledge of the story with its whole, slavery in Egypt thing and interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams, etc, etc. So I'm not going to get too deeply involved in the narrative, as honestly it's quite straightforward, especially if you're already familiar with those parts of the Bible. Now, I'll be honest with you all, I wasn't the biggest fan of 2019's Jesus Christ the Exorcist. I appreciated what Neal was doing with it, making a more musical theatre-style record, but I sadly don't feel that's where Morse's strengths lie, and I do feel that the record suffered as a result, ending up as a somewhat kind of mediocre-sounding stage production at times, rather than a belter of a progressive rock album with worship-based theming, which he has proven as being his bread and butter. Make no mistake though, it was a perfectly fine record, but I honestly felt no huge desire to revisit it after the first few listens. There was, just a little something missing and I wasn't quite sure what it was. The Dreamer has done the admirable job of locating the missing element and putting it at the forefront of the music here. This is a catchy, memorable, and infectiously addictive record in ways that The Exorcist simply wasn't. What's that I hear you cry? A progressive rock opera that is catchy? Surely you jest, but no. Surely I speak unto you the truth. The Dreamer is honestly one of the most immediately enjoyable, endlessly replayable albums that Morse has put out in a very long time, and after the grandiose and suitably scene-setting overture and prologue tracks, Morse starts delivering hit after hit and banger after banger, with what I consider to be some of his most accessible and well-written songs he's put out to date across his entire discography. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here. This is not Neal's best album. This is not even his best faith album. But when you're up against stiff competition like Sola Scriptura, Question Mark, Testimony 2, and The Similitude of a Dream, there's no shame whatsoever about being middle of the pack. But while those albums all deliver in spades on the progressive front, they are all a little bit dense and inaccessible for a casual listener, which is where I feel that The Dreamer plays into its greatest strengths, and that's in making the first part in a two-part prog rock opera about a biblical character not only easy to listen to, but incredibly cool sounding, expansive and wide-reaching in both its sounds and ambitions. So who has Neal brought along for the ride this time round? Obviously this is not the Neal Morse Band, so we have an absence of Mike Portnoy, Randy George and Bill Hubauer, but not of Eric Gillette, who still features here. We have quite a number of notable musicians on this album as well, including Steve Morse and Gabe Klein, who now actually goes toe-to-toe with Portnoy's drumming this time around, unlike on The Exorcist, where he honestly felt a bit like a poor man's replacement. Rounding out the vocal duties, we have Neal, of course, playing the lead and titular role, but with backup offered from the likes of Ted Leonard, Mark Pogue, Matt Smith, no, not Doctor Who, and the discovery of a lifetime for me, Talon David. Talon's role as Potiphar's wife is one of the absolute standout performances on the album, and her delivery in tracks like Slave Boy and Out of Sight, Out of Mind have really stuck with me as some of the best parts of the entire record. There is something incredibly sultry and swaggering about every line she delivers. A sense of veiled threat and danger hangs off each and every punctuated verse and powerful hook. Neal himself still sounds glorious, and for a man in his early 60s now, he sounds as powerful and confident as a man half his age would do. His voice continues to be a solid bedrock on which all of his music lies, and I will forever champion him as one of the voices of modern progressive rock. Much like John Anderson or Geddy Lee, it's an unmistakable style, a unique and very identifiable timbre, and one that I will always feel immediately comfortable and at home with, and his performance on The Dreamer is another winner for him. What I like most about this record, though, is that it manages to explore some musical ideas, phrasings, and passages that haven't yet become common parlance in Morse's extensive catalogue. Now, I've always maintained that it's only truly a Neal Morse record once there's that one keyboard bit that goes widdly 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 widdly. You know the bit. But I honestly can't remember that even happening on The Dreamer. It's honestly quite refreshing to hear that despite how much music Morse has been pumping out recently, there's still quite a few ideas he's obviously got rattling around that he hasn't been able to bring out until now. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong, this is still most assuredly a Neal Morse record. A lot of his signature sounds and motifs are on full display here. I mean, an artist of this kind of veteran level is going to have crutches that he relies on, and fans are going to have certain expectations of his output, and for better or for worse, these are still here. But it's how well he's blended his older, more predictable stylings with what he learnt worked well from The Exorcist that makes The Dreamer such a treat to listen to. I feel there's a lot less musical theatre this time around, but it's not completely gone. The threads are still there, but he's tempered it by making the overall experience a lot more rock and roll. There's better guitar solos, crunchier riffs, more melodic and memorable choruses throughout the experience, and it's really elevated because of this. Eric Gillette is as wonderful as always, and I firmly believe that he alone is capable of carrying virtually any project he's ever been attached to. It just would have been nice to hear him in a vocal role as well, because I love his singing voice. Now, speaking of the vocal roles, I also would have liked a little bit more Ted Leonard. I have a soft spot for his voice, and I do feel he is somewhat underused here. But where he does crop up, he definitely makes a solid impact. But this is an album released under Neal's solo name, so perhaps it's no real surprise here that the guest vocalists are very much precisely that, serving as the addition of spice and accenting to Neal's primary delivery. I've definitely had a great time with this album. It's been extremely replayable and given me plenty of riffs and passages to hum along to in the shower or when I'm idling on other projects. But I honestly don't feel this record by itself is a long-term grower for me. This is popcorn Neal Morse entertainment. The 65-minute runtime actually feels quite short, as the album bobs along at a pretty consistent and engaging pace, never really having much in the way of dips or lulls during the course of the record. But there's not really as many particularly meaty or musically complex and engaging tracks as I might have liked. Perhaps I'm being unfair though. I mean, not everything can be a grandiose, genre-defining epic of the likes of Sola Scriptura, but I can't pretend that I'm not craving another Morse solo album that throws in at least one 20-plus minute epic. But with The Dreamer Joseph Part 2 on the way in early 2024, allegedly at least, who knows? There's time yet for Neal to deliver a 3-track, 70-minute epic finale to this engaging, Moorish, if at times a little unadventurous and safe offering. So, what else can I say about Neal Morse's The Dreamer Joseph Part 1? This record honestly came as a bit of a breath of fresh air for me, after the unengaging Jesus Christ the Exorcist and the frankly utterly forgettable Sola Gratia. I'd been getting worried for the quality of Neal's work being released under his solo name, and was concerned that without his bandmates under the NMB moniker, there just weren't enough good ideas left over for him. The Dreamer has at least proven me partially wrong, as this is an immediately enjoyable album with some flashes and flourishes of greatness, being held slightly back by a sense of at times overbearing familiarity, and perhaps some underutilisation of the guests he's brought along for this ride. This is still a fantastic piece of Christian progressive rock though, and would honestly serve as a really good entry point for Neal's work. It's bright, engaging, and accessible enough for newcomers to get a great feel for Morse's style. And if you like what you heard on this album, oh man, you've got a lot to look forward to should you go digging back into his discography. Recommendation is to grab a digital copy of this one, guys. It's a fun record and definitely one I'll be spinning for a long time, but it's very much a middle-of-the-pack kind of offering. But as I said earlier, when you're in the middle of a pack like this one, you're still streets ahead of most of the competition. This is all, of course, just my opinion, guys, as you know, so tell me what you thought of this record in the comments down below if you've given it a listen. If you did like this video, please do share it around with anyone else who you think will possibly enjoy it, and please do consider subscribing to the channel for more content. I will leave my link tree down below where you will find all the places to find me on social media, as well as a link to my Ko-fi page if you're feeling particularly generous and want to help support the channel. But until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures extremely odd.